Move now to the next item, and I've got to move. I was going to put that to the chair and the deputy of the Environment and Community Committee, actually. I'm just wondering if could I do that, Councillor Walker?
Well, I'd be keen to put my name forward, Mr. Chair. I'm compassionate about this.
Can I actually get to the item first? And that is item 11. And that's our submission. Now, we have, I need to open up the right pages here. Excuse me, members. And it's Jessica Geary, who's the principal author, and I think we might have Dave Allen as well. I was going to, Councillor Walker, before I got to the item, you moved, but I'm very aware of, who leads the work around the council table, and this work falls into the chair and the deputy chair of the Environment and Community Committee. So would Councillor Hills like to move?
I'm finding it extremely hard to hear. It sounds like there's a plane taking off in the town hall. But I'm happy to second if Councillor Walker moves. I'm not worried. Thank you.
We'll take it that way. Councillor Walker moves and Councillor Hills will second. And now we'll go to Jessica. We've got a presentation. In your hands, Jessica.
Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Jess Geary and I'm part of the National Environment Strategy Unit in APSR. I'm here today with my manager Dave Allen and my colleague Paul Crimmins, who is a senior specialist from the Resource Consents team in Regulatory Services. We're here to present to the Planning Committee on the draft Auckland Council submission on the proposed amendments to the National Environmental Standard for Air Quality, or NES-AQ. We are seeking that the committee endorse Auckland Council's draft submission and delegate authority to the chair of the Planning Committee, chair of the Environment and Climate Change Committee, and an IMSB member to approve any minor changes that might be needed. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that there has been a lot of work put into this from other staff who I'm sure are tuning into this meeting today. I have a short presentation for you and then we will answer any questions that you might have. Next slide, please. The NES-AQ is an RMA instrument that sets standards for outdoor air quality, wood burner emissions, and rules prohibiting certain activities with significant discharges of toxic pollutants. The NES-AQ was introduced in 2004 and was amended in 2011. The proposed amendments have been long anticipated and represent approximately 5 years' worth of work for central government. The consultation document was released on the 26th of February 2020. While the submissions were originally due to close on the 24th of April, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, this deadline was extended to the 31st of July. Auckland Council staff have drafted a submission for your consideration. A memo was sent to councillors, local board members and IMSB on the 11th of March 2020. This is included in item 13 of the agenda. I'd like to thank those elected members who provided input. This has informed the draft submission. Local boards, mana whenua and relevant CCOs were provided with an opportunity to input into the draft submission, and feedback was received from Albert Eden and the Aotea Great Barrier local boards, and this has been considered in finalising of the draft submission. Next slide, please. I'll just briefly provide an overview of the proposed amendments. The proposal relates specifically to standards regulating particulate matter, domestic fuel burners and mercury emissions. So firstly, to particulate matter, there's a growing body of international evidence that has shown that finer particles have the potential to cause harm to humans. Therefore, the key amendments relating to particulate matter are to introduce standards to regulate these finer particles, or particulate matter that is 2.5 microns or less in width, known as PM2.5, and that these standards replace the existing standards that regulate coarser particles, or PM10, as the primary measure for managing air quality. For the proposals relating to domestic fuel burners, in recognition that domestic solid burners are a significant source of particulate matter, the proposal is to make the standards more stringent and reduce the emission standards for newly installed burners, and include all types of newly installed burners that use solid fuel under these regulations, including coal burners, multi-fuel burners, pellet burners, open fires, cookers, and water boilers. It is important to note that these amendments will not affect existing domestic burners, only the installation of new, used, or refurbished burners. Lastly, to mercury emissions, New Zealand signed the Minamata Convention on Mercury in 2013. In order to ratify this convention, one of the three main steps needed is to set controls on mercury emissions. As such, the proposal is to prohibit the use of mercury in identified industrial processes and require applications for new activities to consider international best practice guidance. Next slide, please. I'll now briefly cover off the key points of the draft submission. So the submission is generally supportive of more stringent regulation of air quality in New Zealand. We've requested that the interaction between air pollution and climate change should be addressed in a more integrated way. We've also highlighted that the current standards do not adequately regulate gaseous pollutants, such as sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide, and need reviewing. In relation to particulate matter standards, the submission supports replacing the current PM10 standard with the PM2.5 standard as the primary measure for managing air quality, and supports the 24-hour average and annual average PM2.5 standards. We've noted that Auckland has significant PM2.5 contributions from transport sources that are largely outside of the Council's ability to regulate. The submission also observes that Auckland could comply with the PM2.5 standards. Some monitoring at the region's most high-risk sites has been undertaken, and this indicates that the region could comply. Next slide, please. We also highlight that there are some financial implications of the proposed amendments, and I will speak about this in a little more detail in a moment. The submission requests that the threshold at which an airshed is determined to be polluted is lifted, as it is currently unnecessarily stringent, and it does not support the offsetting measures in polluted airsheds, as they are not sufficiently developed for application and are likely to put unfair burden on industry. Next slide, please. For domestic burners using solid fuel, the draft submission is supportive of new, more stringent emission standards for newly installed domestic burners. We have asked that central government explore whether the standards should also apply to existing domestic burners, or whether there should be a progressive phasing out of such burners. The submission also suggests aligning the NESAQ to the National Planning Standards and Zoning Framework, rather than the standards only applying to properties less than 2.5 hectares in size. This will avoid perverse outcomes where small rural properties are required to comply with the standards, regardless of the likelihood of the PM2.5 standards being exceeded in the area. Finally, for mercury emissions, we're supportive, noting that there is likely to be very little practical impact on the Auckland region. We also note that affected industry are better placed to comment on any implications of this proposal. Next slide, please. So the central government decision on the NESAQ is expected following the general election later this year. There are a number of implications that are detailed on this slide, and that's the end of our presentation, and I'll pass back to you. Thank you, Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for your excellent work on this over the last couple of months. I'll take questions from members. Jessica, just one at the outset. How many premature deaths are there in Auckland due to particulate inhalation? And is there a breakdown of, is there a modelling of how many could be from domestic burners?
Sure. The last update for...
Sorry, I'm not sure who that is. Could you introduce yourself?
Sure, Paul Crimmins from Regulatory Services.
Thank you, Paul.
And Air Quality Specialist. The last update for health effects was the Health and Air Pollution in New Zealand study 2012. It has currently been updated. Now, I could give you those figures, which off the top of my head are in the region of 400 in the Auckland region for all sources, but I'd really like those numbers to be updated because they are quite old. And so that is something that the Ministry for Environment are currently undertaking as part of this review.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So you prefer to update, but from memory, and that's, I think the number you gave me is something that I recall as well, but that's from all particulate, including exhaust emission from cars, etc. And so, look, we'll get that separately. Questions from members, please? I don't have any questions from members at this time. Okay, look, this is a great submission. Councillor, can I ask you, just point out to Councillor Linda Cooper. Jessica, Councillor Cooper is the Chair of Regulatory, and part of the submission relates to not going through a full consultative process on a bylaw review. Do you just want to highlight that particular part, Jessica? I just want to make sure that Councillor Linda Cooper has the opportunity to provide any feedback on that particular part. Jessica, can you just highlight that particular part of the submission, please?
Yes, of course. So to highlight that, in order to give effect to the NES AQ, the air quality bylaw for indoor domestic fires 2017 will need to be amended to ensure that it aligns with the NES. Within the submission, Auckland Council has requested that it be able to amend its bylaw as a procedural matter without using the Local Government Act 2002 special consultative procedure.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, Councillor Cooper, just because you're remote, I'm just making sure that you are aware of that. Do you have any feedback on that, Councillor Cooper?
Yes, I mean, if that was way, it would have to come from, a legal change, I guess, or a legal exemption. Obviously, I'm not sure that we're able to do that if we're asking the government to change that. It's a difficult one because we know how controversial that bylaw was at the time that we developed it around indoor domestic fires. So, I mean, I'd be a little bit wary of not having consultation if it did really affect households. But I think that if that comes back as a yes from the government, well, then we'd be able to do it. But I'm always wary of taking away an ability for our public to consult. But otherwise, let's see whether it's in our hands or not. But I am mindful that it does affect people's. It does concern people, and it concerned people a lot last time we went out to this.
Thank you.
I'm not saying I don't support the submission, I do, but we just have to be mindful that not everybody would have the same view in the public.
Okay, thanks for that contribution. Look, we'll proceed as is drafted, and we'll lodge our submission, and the delegated authority is to the chair, deputy, the respective chairs, planning and environment, and an independent Māori statutory board member. So it's moved by Councillor Walker and it's seconded by Councillor Hills. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
No, sorry, have I moved to the vote, or now you've caught me because I don't have you. I had questions and comments. I didn't have anybody asking anything through the system. Look, I will just go to your comment, please, Councillor Walker, but if you could let us know early, because I don't have any record with me at the moment of anybody wanting a further question or wanting to speak. Okay. Can we have your microphone, please?
I don't know what opportunity there is to add to the submission, but there are a few things that I'd raise. Quite obviously, the government, and we identify that submissions from vehicles are a very significant pollutant, and that's a journey that we've been on for a long time. I remember back in the 70s when I was involved with Friends of the Earth, we had a vigorous campaign to get lead out of petrol, and that took years. Anyway, that worked. But there isn't any mention around the restrictions that the government could put in place at source on vehicles. By all means, you can have, restrictions around a watershed, but that is something that I would suggest we could and should be picking up on, and that would also drive, in respect of our climate change strategy, the move to electric vehicles, because it's closely related. So I just make that suggestion, Mr. Chair. And the other observation I would make, and it goes to the notion of submissions, as far as wood burners are concerned, there is really good technology out there now with double and triple burning wood burners that have a minimal amount of emissions, and at the same time they are highly efficient. So in that respect, I also make the observation that the submission again goes to our climate strategy. I have no issue with burning sustainably grown wood to produce heat, so long as it's done well. A critical requirement, though, that's often not picked up, and it is mentioned in here, is the actual choice of the wood. If you burn the appropriate wood and it's dry, then you've got minimal emissions. So I am making some suggestions, Mr. Chair, around some things that we might add that mesh with our climate change strategy. I haven't looked more particularly at the agenda to see what the mention is around what the impacts are in this item, but I would suggest there are a number, and you might be happy and comfortable to pick up on some of those. And the last passing comment is that mercury is captured in here, and I make the observation that at a number of council mortuaries, we've got facilities that burn bodies, and often those bodies contain mercury. I had all mine removed, so I'm okay, but that's not the case with everyone.
You. Did you say you had all your bodies removed?
No, all the mercury, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Have a question. Look, just addressing the points you've raised there, I actually think the submission addresses all the points you've raised. So, members, this was, we were alerted to the submission by way of a memo from Jessica, I think in March, Jessica, wasn't it? And I provided feedback, and Councillor Coombe and Councillor Hills, the three of us, I think we talked about, I think it was Councillor Hills tying in climate more. And that is addressed in the submission. The burners are addressed in the submission. Mercury is addressed in the submission. So, Jessica, can I just come back to you? It's a little bit unusual because we're actually in debate, but can you confirm that the points that Councillor Walker has raised have actually been, in my view, captured in the submission?
Yes, I can confirm that those points have been raised. And if Paul would like to just make a comment about the mortuaries and the mercury emissions, we can address that as well.
Thanks, Jeff.
Briefly, Paul.
We do have a number of crematorium in the Auckland region with Auckland Council.
Paul, you're very hard to hear. Can you just
I'll lean right in.
amplify yourself somehow?
Auckland Council operate a number of crematoria, and yes, I would agree with Councillor Walker that dental amalgam is really our key source of mercury. The Minamata Convention does not go so far as to look at that source. We have separately suggested to the Ministry for Environment that it may be necessary to look at it, but through our resource consenting framework, we do assess and ensure that the levels of mercury discharged from all crematoria, private and council-owned, are appropriate.
Thank you, Paul. Now, I have a question from Councillor Desley Simpson and then comment from Councillor Linda Cooper. Councillor
Thank
Simpson.
you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I just got a question because of something that Linda said. Am I correct in saying if we support this, we give up our right to consult via a bylaw ourselves?
Jessica, can I go to you on that? And this would affect a part of the previous bylaw, not the bylaw in full, is my understanding. And can you give us an idea of the cost of that special consultative procedure, Jessica?
Councillor Darby, it's not Dave Allen here.
Sorry, is it Paul again?
It's Dave Allen here now, Chris.
No, I'm
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I can't hear him.
Yeah, I'll come.
Can you hear me now? It's Dave Allen.
So, Dave, we can hear you, Dave. You're a little bit faint. If you can just be centred in front of your mic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify that the special consultative procedure, what we're suggesting in the submission is that it would be appropriate to, if the central government is looking to adopt these particular changes, it would be appropriate for us to not necessarily have to go through a subsequent process to basically align and confirm what central government has already achieved through this particular central government initiative. In terms of the costs associated with doing a bylaw change, we've been advised from the Community Social Policy Department that that might be in the order of about $10,000 or $15,000 for advertisements in newspapers and other media, as well as, of course, staff time involved with preparing any of those notifications and responding to submissions if they were to eventuate. The other comment I'd make is that I would envisage that this would be there would be parts of the bylaw which may still have currency and that would still need to be in place. It is effectively saying that there are parts of the bylaw that would no longer be required as a result of the NES air quality amendments that we're discussing today.
Okay, that's clear to me. So you've got a higher order direction through the National Environmental Standard, which you're bound to give effect to. You don't have a choice. And so that is then put in place for all jurisdictions, including our own. You're saying it's not something you can really go and consult on when there's a requirement to have it in place. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Councillor Simpson?
Yeah, so sorry, Mr. Chair, because my gut feel is I don't want to give away to central government the right that we have to consult under our own regime. I don't think that's fair for Aucklanders. So it was your second question. You were saying that should this go through, I just need clarification again. So should this go through, it would apply nationwide, and we would basically take that bit out of our bylaw. Is that correct? It's paragraph 19. Hold on, I've got too many screens. Paragraph 19, that last bullet point. Is that clarification, please?
Dave, are you best to respond to that?
Would it be appropriate to change the wording so that we would request that we have the option to amend the bylaw without going through the special consultative procedure if we so wished?
Well, there's one option. I mean, I would prefer, personally, I prefer us to not have to go through a process and hold up expectations that really can't be delivered, because there's a higher order law that needs to be signed up to. I think we could really confuse the public here, sort of giving them the opportunity to submit on a possible outcome which is not achievable. Can I just go to can I go to Director of Strategy on that? I think yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, this would be a national environmental standard, which means it has to apply across the nation. So sometimes these need to then go into some lower order documents or statutes like a bylaw. So broadly speaking, in terms of national policy statements or national environmental standards, we would generally recommend that we wouldn't have to go through another whole consultative procedure, because this is the consultative procedure that we're going through, and if it has to apply across the nation, then there's no point consulting on something that we can't change. So that's the recommendation that the staff have brought, and that's while it sounds as though we are getting rid of public consultation, the fact is it will have happened already, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we may as well just change our documents to be in line with it.
Okay, is that clear now, Councillor Simpson?
Thank you. Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Linda Cooper.
Right, actually, I think what Megan said is exactly right. It'd be like if a government had the courage to decide on Easter trading, we'd all have to do whatever they said rather than leaving it to us. And so all of our bylaws would change in accordance with that. So that's clarified that for me. There wouldn't really be a chance to consult on it because it's been deemed on high. So in that case, I'm fine with it. And I'm imagining other councils are asking the same thing. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, I think Megan's answered or said what I was going to say after all that. So it wouldn't be a case of public consultation if it's a national guideline or standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. And it's good to draw that out. And we have and concluded that. So, Jessica, it is the draft submission as it is presented to us today that we will now vote on. And it's moved by Councillor Walker, seconded by Councillor Hills. So I'll take it on the voices. All those in favour say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And to the contrary, no. And to the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Sorry, I just heard a late abstention, but I didn't get an identity.
It was me.
Me is not an identity.
Councillor Simpson.
Oh, Councillor Simpson. Sorry, I didn't quite hear, put an identification to the voice. Thank you, Councillor Simpson.
Don't you know who she is?
Would you like that recorded, Councillor Simpson?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to, it's 12:30. I think we'll conclude the